If, while you were listening to this, a specific memory surfaced in your mind, don't ignore it. This channel is for people who are willing to look inward with honesty. If you feel like it's time to understand what you built in order to survive, and what may need to be transformed, stay with me until the end. Because today isn't about motivation, it's about recognition. There's a kind of exhaustion that no one notices. It isn't physical, it doesn't show up on tests, it doesn't come with a doctor's note. It's the exhaustion of someone who never gets to break. Someone who learned too early that feeling is dangerous, that needing is weakness, that depending is a risk. You might be that person, the one who holds everything together, who fixes everything, who takes everything, and who, quietly, becomes a wall on the outside and a desert on the inside. Maybe you don't even see yourself as overwhelmed. If anything, you take pride in your resilience. People trust you. They come to you. They admire how steady you are. You're the safe place, the advisor, the one who stays calm when everyone else panics. And deep down, that feeds something in you, a sense of usefulness, of importance, of value. Being the strong one became your identity. And that's exactly where the problem begins. Because no one asks how the strong one is doing. No one imagines the strong one is scared too. That you wake up with an emptiness you can't quite name. That you sometimes want to disappear for a few days, just so you don't have to uphold the image you built. And maybe you have trouble admitting any of that. Because if you're not the strong one, who are you? What's left when your job of holding everyone up is no longer your main role? There's something almost addictive about that position. A kind of quiet dependency. You got used to being needed, to being the balance, to being the emotional adult in the room. And every time someone falls apart, and you manage to keep everything standing, something inside you gets confirmed. I'm the one who holds it together. You may have never said that out loud, but it guides your choices, your relationships, even your ambitions. You don't just choose based on desire, you choose based on responsibility. But here's the question you may be avoiding. Who taught you that love equals emotional performance? Who made you believe your value depends on how much you can endure? At some point in your story, being strong stopped being a choice and became a survival strategy. And strategies that are born to protect you can, over time, become invisible prisons. If this touched something in you, it's not a coincidence. This is only the beginning. There's a subtle difference between being strong and needing to be strong. The first is a quality. The second is a compulsion. And you may have never noticed the moment you cross that line. Because at first it looked like maturity, self-control, the ability to handle your emotions. But little by little, something shifted. You weren't choosing to hold it together anymore. You simply couldn't let go. Look at your own story. That you had to be the most self-aware person in the room. That you had to swallow your tears so you wouldn't worry anyone. Maybe it was childhood, when you realized someone close to you was already carrying too much. Maybe it was a relationship where showing vulnerability led to rejection. Or maybe no one ever explicitly told you to be strong, but you understood it was safer that way. And what starts as adaptation becomes identity. The strong one doesn't fight. The strong one fixes. The strong one understands. The strong one forgives. The strong one endures. Little by little, you removed parts of yourself from human contact. Your anger went quiet. Your sadness became productivity. Your fear became control. Your exhaustion became efficiency. You kept functioning, and that confused everyone, including you. But there's a high cost to that emotional efficiency. Because emotions don't disappear just because you decided not to feel them. They relocate, they accumulate. They compress. And what you call chronic fatigue, lack of motivation, an emptiness for no reason, might not be weakness. It might be saturation. It's like holding a weight for too long. Eventually your arm doesn't fail because it isn't strong enough. It fails because it has been working continuously for too long. And here comes the hardest confrontation. Maybe you're not just trapped in the role of the strong one. Maybe you're attached to it. Maybe there's a quiet fear that if you lower your guard, no one will stay. That if you show need, you'll lose respect. That if you stop holding everything up, you'll find out no one is willing to hold you. Do you see the trap? The strength that protected you may be isolating you. Now, we need to go deeper, because this isn't only about exhaustion. It isn't only about too much responsibility. Something more subterranean is happening. something you may have spent years avoiding. Every time you chose to be the steady one, the balanced one, the one who understands, something inside you was left behind. And what gets left behind doesn't disappear. It waits. Inside every person who takes pride in being strong, there's a part that wants to be cared for. A part that wants to fail without losing love. A part that wants to say, I don't know, I can't do this, I need help too. But that part was labeled inconvenient too early, too fragile, too much. So you pushed it away. And in doing that, you created an internal split. On one side, the strong one, and on the other, the one who is not allowed to show up. That rejected part isn't weak. It's human. But because it was excluded from your conscious identity, it began to operate in the shadows. Maybe it shows up as unexplained irritation when someone needs too much from you. Maybe it appears as the urge to pull away for no clear reason. Maybe it manifests as procrastination, quiet sabotage, a heaviness you can't explain rationally. You call it lack of discipline, but it may be something deeper asking for space. Here's the paradox. The more you identify with the image of strength, the more intolerant you become of any sign of vulnerability in others and in yourself. And that creates rigidity. You start silently judging people who can't handle it. You get impatient with other people's drama. But deep down, what irritates you isn't them. It's the part of you that was never allowed to be that way. That is the strong one's shadow. Not evil, not moral weakness. Simply everything you haven't integrated. What you can't recognize in yourself, you project. What you can't accept, you fight. And the more you fight that inner part, the more psychic energy it demands. That's why you're tired. That's why you feel empty. You're holding up an image while repressing an entire side of your own nature. So the confrontation becomes more intimate. Who would you be if you didn't have to be the example all the time? If that question shook you a little, that's a good sign. It means you're not just listening, you're recognizing yourself. Write in the comments, I'm tired of being the strong one all the time. Not as a complaint, as recognition. Sometimes naming it is the first act of real courage. There's something you may not have admitted to yourself yet. It's not only obligation, it's not only responsibility. There's pleasure in it. A subtle pleasure, almost invisible, but real. The pleasure of being indispensable. The pleasure of being the one everyone turns to. The pleasure of hearing, I'm so glad you're here. That feeds something deep, something you may never have learned to nourish any other way. Being needed gives you meaning, direction, a sense of solid identity. When someone needs you, you know exactly who you are. You know what to do. You know your role. But when no one needs you, what happens? A strange emptiness shows up. Restlessness, a sense of uselessness. And you try to fill it quickly, taking on more responsibilities, helping more people, offering to fix more problems. Do you see how this becomes a cycle? The stronger you are, the more people depend on you. The more they depend on you, the more your identity gets reinforced. And the more that identity solidifies, the harder it becomes to step away from it. Not because you're too altruistic, but because without that role, you might have to face an uncomfortable question. Who am I when I'm not saving anyone? That's the delicate point. Achisomi point being strong stopped being just a personality trait. It became a way to secure love, to secure belonging, to make sure you won't be abandoned. Because, unconsciously, you may have learned that love is conditional, that it stays as long as you deliver something, as long as you carry, as long as you're useful. And here's the hardest confrontation in this chapter. Maybe what you call strength is, in part, fear. Fear of not being enough, without performance. Fear of not being chosen if you aren't stable all the time. Fear that if you show your vulnerability, people will discover you're also confused, insecure, imperfect. Now the question starts to hurt a little more. If you didn't have to prove anything to anyone, would you know how to simply exist? You may have spent years believing your resilience is a sign of maturity, that your ability to endure is proof of growth. But there's an invisible cost when someone never lets themselves fall. Because falling isn't just failing, it's allowing someone to witness your humanity. And when that never happens, something begins to harden inside. Think about your relationships. How many times have you truly shown fear? How many times have you said, I don't know how to deal with this? How many times have you cried in front of someone without immediately trying to pull yourself together? If you're always the steady one, people get used to that version of you. And slowly, a subtle distance forms. Not because love is missing, but because shared emotional truth is missing. There's a specific kind of loneliness in being the strong one. It's the loneliness of not being fully seen. People admire your strength, but they don't know your fragility. They trust your stability, but they don't know your exhaustion. You're there for everyone, but very few are truly there for you. And maybe, deep down, resentment has started to build. The feeling that you're always the one who gives more. That resentment can turn into apathy, or emotional distance, or that sudden urge to disappear and start over. Not because you hate people, but because unconsciously, you're tired of sustaining a version of yourself that never rests. Your body keeps functioning, your mind keeps solving, but your soul starts to lose color. And here's the consequence almost no one mentions. When you never fall, you also never allow yourself to be lifted. And without that experience, you lose something fundamental in the human psyche, the trust that you can be cared for. You learn how to care, but not how to receive. You learn how to guide, but not how to lean. And that creates a deep imbalance. So maybe the question that's emerging now is uncomfortable. Are you truly strong? Or do you simply refuse to be seen when you're not? Maybe you're realizing something now. This isn't only about tiredness. This isn't only about too much responsibility. It's about identity. For so long, you built yourself around strength that any crack feels dangerous. If I let this armor drop, what's left? If I stop holding everything up, who holds me? But look honestly, the armor is already cracking. The sudden heaviness, the disproportionate irritation, the urge to isolate, the procrastination you call a lack of discipline. These aren't moral flaws. They're signals. The psyche always compensates when something becomes too one-sided. And maybe your life has become one-sided in the direction of strength. When you systematically repress vulnerability, it doesn't disappear. It shifts into indirect behavior. You might start sabotaging yourself quietly. You might lose enthusiasm for goals that used to matter. You might feel empty, even while surrounded by people who depend on you. That isn't weakness. It's imbalance. The confrontation here is simple, but profound. You are not only the strong one. That's a part of you. But it's not the whole of you. And the more you identify exclusively with that role, the farther you drift from yourself. Individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires something difficult, recognizing what you spent years trying not to be. Maybe, for the first time, you're beginning to suspect that your strength doesn't need to disappear. It needs to be humanized. That being whole isn't abandoning your capacity to carry, it's including your capacity to feel. And it starts with something small, almost invisible, allowing yourself to admit that you need to. Not a magical solution, not a dramatic transformation, just the first conscious crack in the armor. If this resonated in you, breathe. Confrontation is the beginning, not the end. If this touched something you never had space to express, maybe you're not broken. Maybe you've just become too one-sided. Here, we're not chasing perfection, we're chasing wholeness. If you want to continue this process of becoming whole, without magic formulas, without illusions, subscribe to the channel, because this isn't about being stronger. It's about being more whole.